we're going to get started. Let's see, I'm trying to think. VP programming is not here, so social.
Okay, so I spoke with Maureen, and she could do April 30th for our final get-together. Does that work for everybody that day?
It's a Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, it's a free enrollment, so the evening would be great.
Okay. So you're thinking about 5, but you can come anytime. Whenever. So it's like, that'll be like our last get together, so that will be when we reveal who our, buddies were throughout the semester. So at Maureen's house. Yeah. And so I can send you details about her address and like what to bring and those kind of things within this week. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, VP of Communications is out as well, so past president.
No update from me still. I'm working on scheduling the panel, kind of Google Hangout with the current graduates of the program to talk about transitioning out to that first professional position. So I apologize, things have been crazy, so I will get on that and have an announcement out hopefully by the end of this week on when that will be scheduled.
It's April, so we all understand. So I'll try to pick up some of the pieces then. So in terms of programming, we're thinking about doing a first 40 days program, kind of titled along the lines of making the most of your first year, and be like a 35 minute presentation, trying to make it interactive for students to see the importance of student involvement and how that can positively impact your college career. And then hosting it in the union, so then we could take them down to CSI and introduce them to where the resources are for getting involved on campus, and possibly working with them in terms of showing them, like, how would I use TigerLink to find out about a student organization that I'm interested in, et cetera, et cetera. So we're working to flesh out ideas on that. I think VP of Communications will also be working on, we have money set aside from the SAGA allocations that would be for future like NASPA regional trips and national trips. So looking at what does the process for applying and getting that funding for yourself personally as a member of the HESA cohort and SAGA mean, and what does that look like, and try to make that a fair experience for everyone. Yeah, that's everything.
Grad orientation.
Jared's also been gaining interest. So if any of you know of grad students from other areas, be sure to contact him and let them know who they are and speak to them personally. So looking to get support from other areas in terms of a grad student orientation for all grad students, and that would also allow us to know grad students in other areas instead of just our own cohort. So allow us to kind of mix and mingle and get to see who everyone else is, because they don't know who we are and we don't know who they are. So anything else? Yeah. Okay. Well, and then if you don't have any updates, you can, or did you have anything? Sorry. Look at everyone behind me.
Yes, the SAGA calendar should be booked out through May. There's not that many in May because we're pretty much done. So just first couple weeks. But April, there's still several of the academic advising events. And then even Mike Barnett can count in our culinary experience as first years, because the second years are pretty much done.
Yeah, as they choke and go, yeah, right. No.
And then I just want to say thank you for letting me serve as your professional development chair for SAGA this year. At first, it was a little rocky because I was like, what do I do with this position? Because there was no direction for it. So that's both fun and a challenge. But lately, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I feel like I have sort of a grasp of a direction, and I've been able to, just have more fun. Okay, shall we do a drawing, or should we do it after?
It's totally up to you.
We do it. Let's see. Michael. With A. Okay, so let me read it real quick, because last time I didn't read it all the way through. So I told you what the right one was, but we didn't read it all the way through. Okay, what prompted the beginnings of the assessment movement in higher education, which began in the early 1980s? A. Economic and civil changes in the 1970s causing financial crisis for many institutions, an influx of diverse students, and dwindling student populations for their campuses. B, which was the right answer. B was an increase in post-World War II veterans climbing the ranks to assume leadership positions on college campuses. And C was the Commission on Institutions of Higher Education's requirement that every affiliated institution conduct an outcomes-based assessment, resulting in a paradigm shift for the rest of higher education. Man, that's kind of tricky. And then D was W.E. Deming's development of the 14 principles for continuous improvement adopted by state and local governments while inadvertently influencing the operations of higher ed learning institutions.
I think that was a Dr. Ham question for assessment. Anybody else?
Yeah, and so with that said, like I learned a lot through making this question because like I wasn't really familiar with Deming's development, and so well, I didn't know that you guys would be either. It was more like to trick you. But, so go, Michael. He got a Starbucks card, $5 Starbucks card.
Woo! So while Patty is looking to make sure there's no stragglers out in the hallway, one more thing I forgot to mention is community service hours. As a student organization, we have to have at least 10 community service hours among everyone. And then I think through student awards, like you could even be the student organization with the most service hours. But if you guys would like to submit those either through TigerLink or if you want to email them to me, tell me the number of hours, what it was. And that way I can put it into the system and we can rack up those service hours. And that can be, you know, if you go to a conference and you volunteer to help out and things like that, it can also count as community service hours, or when you're volunteering with your like students who you may work with, things like that. So
Those reminds me, Brittany's community service at the Bethesda place is the 28th,
Yeah.
which is I think a Thursday.
Mhm.
And so she said you could guys can kind of come and go and we can run that as part of the organization service.
Awesome. Well, now we'll let Dr. Griffin take the
There
floor.
may be people come in to get their food out of the refrigerator since we are actually within the hour. So I thought it was interesting that Deming's question was in there. So I took a whole class on Deming when I was in grad school. So I thought that was very fascinating, that tying it to higher education since it was first tied to industry. So, but it was something that was very successful. He was basically a change agent for management operations. So today I was asked to actually talk about college teaching. And the reason I said college teaching is because some people are planning for that, want to do that, or trying to create an experience where they have the opportunity to do that while they're in grad school. Some people might be asked to do that who are thinking, I don't really want to do that, but hey, it's part of the perfect job that I always want to. So what I'm going to actually do today is talk about how that actually impacts what is actually happening. So we need someone to teach. That's usually how the conversation is approached to a person. And new people are a perfect opportunity because people go, oh, they have student loan debt, they'll be more apt because sometimes there's additional money that is actually attached to that. There's just a variety of things that come. So if you are approached, and that was not part of the position that you actually accepted, what are the key questions that you need to be asking the person who has approached you? Number one, is this a coordinated course? Okay, because that means it's already completely designed. It's basically a course in a box, and you're a facilitator. Okay, so from a perspective of time and things that happen for that, there's still a time commitment, but there's no learning curve prior to being able to teach that is going to take you months to get figured out. The second is, if the answer is no here, is this a standalone course that would need to be developed? That means they're at ground zero. And that may be extremely overwhelming because a lot of times when you're coming into a new position, what happens is they need somebody involved. Maybe they've hired you, you start in June, maybe July 1, and they're talking about a course being ready to go in August, or if you accept a job that's at a school that starts after Labor Day at early September. So you always have to think about these things, and specifically when you are in a student affairs position, what is the position that you have? If you're going into orientation, right, things that work with the first 40 days, things that are really, really heavy up front, you may only be thinking, This is all I can do. If it's not already developed, that's not something I want to do. If it's a standalone, do I have the time? Because oftentimes that means you're not working 40 hours a week, right? That's the 50, 60 hours the first semester, the first month of the semester. And do you really have the time to allocate to that when you're trying to acclimate to your new institution and what you're actually doing? So sometimes it's that thought of, gee, I'd really like to, but when it, I'd be more interested next year because I don't feel like that I can give the time that is appropriate here. So what are we talking about? A coordinated class. Most times with a coordinated class, the syllabus is already ready, which means if the syllabus is ready, the course should be ready. Okay? Textbook is selected. Course goals and learning outcomes have been defined. The assignments and assessments are created and outlined in the schedule, and the identified population who will take the course has already been determined. Part of the reason I say the syllabus is created already first is because you shouldn't have a complete syllabus created if you haven't done these other things. So a lot of times, like I would hear people who would come. So when we first started doing distance education and moved it from what people called continuing ed, where they would mail you something out and you would do the assignments and you would mail it back. But we really went into an online environment and the courses exploded. And so there was a great need, people asking for things. I sat in a meeting with faculty and I heard someone say, are you kidding me? Somebody said, I can't get a course together that fast. And they're like, what? It takes 15 minutes to write a syllabus. Most of the people in the room were extremely offended because back up the bus, clearly you don't know what it takes to create a course because the syllabus is not the first thing that you create. Maybe your office hours, your course name, hopefully the course description, there may be a few things on that syllabus, but in depth, that syllabus is reliant on all the things that come after the point. So being able to really ask people, what does that look like? So review all the materials. When you get a coordinated course, right? It's a course in a box. That's how I refer to it. What does that look like? You need to review all the materials. So your time is very different what you're looking at. You want to review the syllabus. You actually want to read the textbook that you're going to teach from. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily in depth on every chapter in the beginning, but you need to read the textbook just so you know overall what is there, and then be able to go back and focus. And the reality is a lot of times for people that very first time, they've read the textbook. Okay, they just read it for reading it. But then they're really going in depth, and you'll kind of see that when I talk about lesson plans, going in depth before they're getting to that point in the class. So always having that goal. So what is it? I really want to stay 3 weeks ahead of what students are reading. Is it 2? What is that for you? And a lot of that will depend on who your population is in the class. Grad students are more apt to read ahead than people in the first year experience course. So there's just, there's a difference in what you're looking at based on the population. So how far ahead do you need to stay in regards to depth in the course? Being able to review the assignments, doing the assignments yourself. Do the assignments make sense? Are there questions that you would have? Because that's going to create questions probably for your students as well. So can I do these assignments? Do I understand what it means here, how they tie in, what the applicability is? And of course, the assessments. So what does that mean? When I'm giving an exam in a course in a box and I've never looked at the exam, that's really not cool as a person who's teaching, because people will take the exam and they'll hand it in to you and they will ask you a question immediately. And if all you're doing is pushing out the exam and not really looking at it until it's time to start grading, you can't do that. You can't answer those questions for that student. What do you mean? I didn't know that question was on. Is that really what you want to say? Because that's really going to detract for them having a respect for you, believing that you are in fact eligible to teach. You're the expert for them that's in front of that. So really being able, if you're asking about it on an assessment, it's things that should have been covered before. A lot of times, whether that's in a seminar class or discussion, or if it's in an entry-level class, by really talking about what's happening in the chapter more in depth. And this should be tied to what is happening here within that class. So being familiar, knowing, is there something that's confusing? If there is, and it's confusing to you, what's that going to be to somebody who that's not their content area? So being able, through lecture, through application in the classroom of assignments, being able to make that connection so that it's clear to them what that actually means. Instead of them, everybody misses the question, right? If everybody misses the question, there's a link missing somewhere. And it's probably not every student in the class. And so being able to think about that and go back. So once you've actually gone through these, creating lesson plans, if they're not already provided. Sometimes, of course, in a box they are. Sometimes, for instance, in COM 100 here, everyone who teaches that class has to go through an orientation for that class. They go chapter by chapter. People take turns teaching a lesson so that different people can see how things would actually come into play. But being able to create a lesson plan is really nice, especially when you're first starting, because you know what your plan is, you know what you need when you go to that class. So for instance, when I hire somebody, if they've never taught before and the course is already developed, the first time I don't expect them to make any change at all, okay? But I want the course to stay current. So it's important to me that time, you know, at the end of the semester, they reflect, or at the end of each chapter, that they're actually making reflections of things that could make the course better. So they're learning that as they go along so that they can do that. It's really important for them to create a lesson plan, because if they're sick, like if Nikki's sick, she can give to Brittany the lesson plan, and Brittany knows when she leaves the office everything she needs to take with her to class that day, what's happening, how much time each thing should take. And so being able to outline that for other people, if you're in a course where you want somebody, hey, to pick it up when you're sick or something, having those things already in place, or if you're going to a conference, because it's going to happen. If you're teaching, you're going to go to a conference, what's that going to do for your class? Are you asking someone to cover? Is it a research day? Is it called the gift of time for a big project in the class? So what does that actually look like? So if this is not provided, you want to do this for yourself. If they're provided and you don't feel like it's detailed enough for you based on how you like to have things organized, don't hesitate to make it what works for you. Because then you have that opportunity, right? You go back from class to reflect on what happened. If there seemed like there was a problem or a disjointed item in the class that day, you can quickly address that on the side of your lesson plan, because you're going to update your lesson plans going forward. And so you're able to identify that as you go along. And so there are great benefits from having lesson plans. So the standalone needs developed. So what other questions come from the course that's not in the box already? Follow-up, has this course been taught before? If the course has never been taught and they want you to teach, my best advice to you is say, I'm sorry, but that timeline won't work for me. You know, if you still have an interest, I'd be happy to do that in a year. But for something that has nothing, it's never been taught before, course development does not happen overnight. And so looking at what you actually have. If it has been taught before, what materials do you have to utilize? So somebody used to teach it and they left. So at our institution, every semester, first week of school, we have to provide the syllabi that we're using for each of our classes to the department office. So they're on file. So if somebody leaves, somebody gets sick, somebody dies mid-semester, they can pull out that syllabus, ask somebody, and one of us will pick up the slack, okay? So being able to do that. So sometimes, you know, that can be a huge thing that's saved. And maybe it's been a class that hasn't been taught for 4 years. So when I'm asked to teach a class that's never been taught before, I want a year, because that's not my primary job. And so here's my primary job. So that's one of those back burner projects that I work on as I have time, and I need to figure out the time for that. If the answer is no, is the foundation of the course already created? At Fort Hays, you can't just say, I'm creating a course, here it is, okay? There's a process. The course has to have everything defined, the syllabus, the course goals, learning outcomes, textbooks been selected, assignments, assessments are created, and a submission moves forward out of your department through your college to faculty senate. If it's an undergrad, faculty senate rules, makes a decision, the provost puts the course in the system. That's a very abbreviated version. It doesn't really happen that fast. On the graduate level, it would go to the grad council to be approved. And, you know, is there another course like this? Do we really need this? For those of you who have heard a lot of discussion in regards to the freshman seminar course, and people are, well, I can't change that because that's what was approved. So there is often a process. So even if the whole course never was taught, there is some place to start from. which typically means the course goals and learning objectives will not be changed. It does not mean the textbooks cannot be changed. Textbooks need to be changed as information changes, and you need to stay current with those. So if not, do any of these exist? And of course, who is the target population? For a 600 level class, I do things very different than I do for a 100 level class, based on the population that is there. So standalone needs development. So the department should be able to provide you at minimum a course description, the goals and the learning outcomes. Why are they teaching this class? Why is it in the course catalog? What is the purpose? Did they just say, hey, it'd be a fun thing to do? Or is there actually a purpose with an intent here? So on here, I'm not going to like tell you how to develop course objectives or anything, but I did give you a web link that you can go to that is a really good indicator of talking about the difference between goals for a course and objectives and what those mean and how do you actually plan those. So that information would be there. Having course objectives, the course description is key to start, because otherwise you're just going, okay, how does this work? So what is the intent? What is going to be delivered from this course? Then you're looking for a text that will align with the information. I'm going to pass this out. Well, that aligns with the information you've been provided for the population the course is intended to serve. And so this link actually will take you to information that talks about things that you need to consider when you're actually doing the development of the course. What I'm handing out to you is about a textbook, and this is just picking one subject area. So a lot of different subject areas have a checklist. Publishers create them all the time. Of course, when a publisher creates it, it's due to you picking a book from their company, of course. But you really have to think about, what do you want the text to do? So how many of you are in a class where there's not a text? You're in a class. There's no text at all. Is it an OER?
No, it's cultural diversity. Through here.
Okay, and there's no text. What are you using for a reference for information?
Articles, reading.
Yeah, there's just
Electronic
different electronic
readings.
articles.
Okay. So of course, there's still course materials. There's just not a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And sometimes, so for instance, when I teach a seminar in college teaching, I don't use a textbook because I'm using a variety of different resources from different places across the country that I think speak well to what I'm asking someone to do if they're developing a course. Because when they come into the class, they have to know already, what course am I talking about? They have to have a point of reference, because we can't write objectives for something that's not the course we're teaching. Everything has to seamlessly come together at the end with an end product. So being able to look at what that means. But text, think about textbooks that you've had, okay, course materials that you've had. We've all had some we liked probably, we've had some we hated. So let's think about the ones we liked first. What are some of the things that you actually liked about a textbook? Anybody?
They give them real life situations.
Okay, so it's applicable and understandable for application.
I thought the law book was like, you read it like you were interacting with Peter rather than, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like textbooky.
Yep.
He like made references to Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah.
And he was kind of humorous about making fun of people.
So that's kind of nice when you think about the population, right? You're not in law school, where the textbook would probably be written very, very different if you were actually taking a law course in law school. Okay, let's think about books that you did not like. Tell me something that you did not like about a book.
When they would beat a dead horse, like they would say the same thing over and over and over again. You know,
Making no new point or expanding.
yeah.
Okay.
It would try to explain something but not really do it in a way that was understandable, and then it would just go to really complex mathematical equations
Okay.
that they never explained what that math equation actually meant, why it was important.
Okay.
So they didn't really do its job.
You have to see it when there's like terrible grammatical errors.
Ooh.
Right.
Really embarrassing.
Okay. So picking a textbook isn't typing in the title, right? Looking for a subject area and going, oh, that's the cheapest one, let's buy that book. You know, from a student perspective, you know, I think about that. I do think about textbook cost, but I also think about the fact that can the cheapest textbook do what I need it to do to support the course? Is it a supplement? Is it a required textbook? For most people, when they choose a textbook, it's a required component. There may be ancillary readings, maybe journal articles that are suggested to help you understand what's in the book. But should you have to go get something additional, or should the book do the job for a student? So really being able to think about what that means. If it's not applicable, you can't take it out and you can't use it, it's really hard to read something, right? One of my big pet peeves is books that are not current. You know, in history, maybe that's one thing, right? But in other things, what do we hear about the face of education? It's changing, it's changing, it's changing. But the book you're using is from 1999, right? The examples don't matter. Sometimes you're using examples from things that don't even cover the population, right? Those people weren't even born. When I stand up and I talk about the Partridge Family, most of you are probably going, what is that? So if I'm talking about things and trying to bring them in the class, they need to make sense for you. You need to understand. The examples in textbooks needs to be current so that you can grasp what is there, but also it makes it easier as an instructor for you to talk to your students about why it matters. Students need to know why the textbook is important for them in your class. Because if you're not talking about the importance of the text at the beginning of the class, you're going to have students who will not purchase the text. You know, can you pass? And I tell my students in my classes, you cannot pass my class without the book. When people email me and say, can I get the older version or 2 versions ago because it's so much cheaper? No. Because the assessments are applicable to the book we're using now. And I shouldn't have to point out from every back edition, if I'm using edition 8, well, in edition 1 it was this, and 2 it was this. No. This is the book, and there's a reason for using that, because I want to use things that are current, that are applicable to the people who are in the class. So when I pick a book, like I said, for a 600 level class, it is not the same way I pick a 100 level book. You know, the terminology, the understandability, they're written at different levels. There's a reason for that. But I don't want to pick a 600 book that talks to people like they're freshmen in college when that's not the population in the class. As a grad student, you probably don't want to be reading Jack and Jill Went Up the Hill. So you have to think about, when you pick up a book and you look at it, what does that actually look like? Did the person or persons that wrote the book, are they really contributing to the field that this course is within? Because if not, how did they become an expert to write a book about it? What do they know? What makes them the expert for a book that I'm going to request? Actually require, I never have a request, so I've never done that. So being able to determine assessments and assignments, this can go back to the book. So you might think about a book that you've had that has questions in it, right? There are discussion questions at the end. There are these little side things that draw your attention to, this is how this was applied, this specific concept, this is what we're looking about. You know, why is facial expression important? I'm teaching nonverbal dysphoria. You know, is facial expression important in nonverbal, and where would you read that in regards to meeting somebody for the first time? You know, where is that at? Give examples. What do those things look like? But being able to utilize a good textbook comes with supplemental information that you can choose to use or not to use. Whether that's group work, it's individual assignments, it's things that you can just tell people that's supplement. If you choose to do this, you can do it. It's not going to be graded. It's just to help you understand the material better. But what does that look like? Is there a test bank? And just because there's a test bank does not mean it's a good test bank. Okay, so typically when a textbook is written, other people are asked to write the tests, the test bank. It's not typically the original authors. So if you're looking at a test bank, you should never just upload it and start using it. You need to actually read the questions. Do they even go with the chapters that they're aligned with? Does it make sense? Okay, so it's not a given, because I'll hear people go, oh man, there's a test bank, I'm all over that. Have you looked at the test bank? Is it the type of test bank you would want? If all it is fill in the blank, multiple choice, and true, false, I'm not interested. Because I want to see application, and the application doesn't come in those types of questions. Application comes in short answer and essay. And so that's important for me. For some people, they're just like, I don't really want to grade. I just want the system to grade it. To me, that's not really teaching. I think that you should be grading. That's actually part of that. But being able to determine assignments and assessments. Sometimes they will talk about case study things that you can use. So really thinking about what does that look like. With today, I love it when I have a book that I really like and the publisher has video components, quick things, because I use a lot of video stuff in my classes that I go find on YouTube or somewhere else and I connect. But I love it when they have examples that I can use. So watch this video. Tell me what is wrong with family communication. Which components can you identify from this family video? You know, I will ask them to be able to do that because I want them to recognize it. And so if that comes with it, that's always really nice. If I'm teaching an advertising class, current examples of advertising, crisis management, what does that look? Give me specific case studies that these people in my class will have heard about with the media development. So that becomes important. So at the point you have all of those things lined out, now you can create the syllabus, or at least have more than your name and your contact information and the name of the course on the syllabus. So there's actually, Cornell does a really good job of identifying, and they just updated this link from what they had about a year ago. But it really talks about what are the things that should be included. That's something that's relative to who you are. Chap Rackaway will tell you, if you take a class from him, if you have syllabus less than 25 pages, that's amazing. But he uses the syllabi for a lot of things that I wouldn't use it. To me, the syllabus is to lay out the rules, how I grade, what the course objectives are, the goals for the course description, how do you contact me, what are my rules for etiquette, you know, what does that look like? It's a directional type document. Chap's like, you're going to read this article, so here's this article, okay? So, I mean, and that's just because he wants to put it all in one document, so he can always say, it's in the syllabus, it's in the syllabus. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to figure out what works for you. A 25-page document for a 100-level class is extremely overwhelming. And there are people who will drop classes when they see that on the first day because they don't really comprehend that this is about the whole semester and everything that goes. So I have the syllabus. I have an assignments table, okay? Then I have an assignment tab where they're in order and they shut off when you can't submit them anymore. You know, so you have to think about, based on the population, what's truly going to work for me? What does that look like? And then lesson plans, right? You've done all the things that you need. You've created your syllabus. Now you need to create lesson plans. This is a great link that the page has a ton of different things on it that are related to lesson plans, but it gives you a lot of different opportunities to see what am I looking at. It's not that there's one size fits all. So figuring out what does that look like for you. If you create it, if you handed it to a colleague, could they interpret it? Right? Because if that's how it works and people say, that's okay, 12. No. I mean, you're teaching. You should have a lesson plan. You should know what's happening. Even if it's a lecture class inside where you meet 2 times a week, maybe you just know this week we're doing this. You know, and sometimes it's about who came to class and can you tell if people really read or not? Because sometimes that happens in a seminar-based class, and that means I'm not going to regurgitate to you in a 600-level class what you should have read in the chapter. We're here, we want to discuss it, we don't talk about things, but it becomes pretty obvious when nobody's read. So what does that do to my lesson plan? Does it make sense for me to move forward, or do I need to flip something up to start thinking about application so that when people go back and read, they understand why that didn't work so easy for them? Because they didn't read and the application was important for what was actually going to happen at that point. So, you know, this is a great link to look at for a variety of different ways to create lesson plans, because there's not a one-size-fits-all for anything in teaching. So, college teaching. Tell me what kind of questions you have about teaching.
How are the qualifications for getting like a grad level class approved? Because like our technology class wasn't decided upon until last semester, and it feels kind of like it's a pilot.
class? Is it a seminar? Does it say seminar in education? What does it say at the front of the course?
I think it's a
He said-
number, isn't it?
Right, well, and it could be a HESA number, but it could be a variable topic
But it
HESA
just
number.
says like
He
HESA
said-
875.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
think it is.
is she talking about the tech course?
Yeah.
He said
So-
technology. or
So in
technology.
regards to a seminar, so every department has classes that allow them to be flexible and try something out for 2 to 3 years. Is it seminar and HESA? Okay, so that means they get to test drive it as a seminar.
We're guinea pigs.
So, well, I don't know if this is the first, it may be the first year, they may have used it somewhere else, but, so the idea is you can test drive it to see, is this something valid? So everyone has one of those variable title lines that typically says seminar in whatever the department is. So you can teach it, value added, people want it, lots of people want it. Okay, so we need to put this into our regular curriculum. So then that becomes something different where it then goes through the process. Where a seminar is about variable topics. Sometimes it's just that there's something really, really timely happening. And man, we need to be able to offer a course and we need to be able to do it right now. And so that protects that. But if they want to keep it in the curriculum, it has to go through the whole process. And typically you don't want to be a guinea pig in one of those if you've not taught before and developed a course from nothing. Because that does put that whole load on top of you. So what are they looking at from that perspective? Other questions? And seriously, you can ask me anything because I will straight up answer it. Yes.
How does it work going from being, like, I want to be a director of admissions. How does it work from doing that to wanting to teach? Because I would like to teach one day. What does that process look like?
So are you wanting to, so variety of questions. So the institution that you go to, as a director, will they allow you to teach at the same time? So that's always a consideration. So I have a combination title. So I'm the director of academic advising, but I'm also, so I've been through the promotion process on the academic side. So I'm an associate professor in communication studies. So that was something that was very important to me. I had taught pre-1996 for quite a while. And so at the point that I got my doctorate and I accepted the position I'm in currently, that was important to me to keep attached. And so that's actually on my contract as my title. Okay, so part of that depends on the institution you're going to. Will they allow you to teach? Because if you came here, so if Tricia said, hey, I'd like to teach a course. Okay, so Tricia teaches the freshman seminar class. And she can do that with a master's. But she is at an instructor rank, and that's where she would stay unless she would choose at Fort Hays to go and get a doctorate. And then be able to work with a specific department because the rank would have to come from a specific department at that point. Part of what happens is a lot of times, and so a lot of people that I know came into student affairs very different than I did. Like I didn't apply for a job in student affairs. I was hired on the academic side. I worked on the academic side. There was a little political posturing going on. And so the decision was made and it wasn't in agreement with anybody, but one person said that's how it's going to be. And so there was no more discussion for anybody involved in the process. That's how I ended up in student affairs with my same job, but on in the student affairs side. Okay, so a lot of times what will actually happen when you come in as a director, if you have the opportunity to work on your doctorate during that time, and you know that I'm not saying, hey, that's your first 2 years in a new job out of a master's program, but being able to do that and have opportunities and to really, as a director of admissions, that's a great connection to every academic department, right? To build relationships and talk about opportunities that may happen. So for instance, Nikki, who's in my office, she's the assistant director in our office. She teaches in health and human performance because she has a graduate degree that is related to that. And some days she may leave Fort Hays. Her husband's a coach. So she doesn't always get to leave when she chooses to leave. It's movement because of that. And so one of the things that's important to me as her supervisor is to make sure that she has as many opportunities if she had to leave here as she can to be able to do different things. So I would, you know, people will say, do you ever think about leaving? I don't think about leaving a lot, you know, but the reality is, you know, I have another person that I have to worry about too. And so that person would need to secure a position first because my husband does not have the same kind of options that I do. because I can teach online. I could continue to teach full-time for 4 days online through my academic department. If I wanted to, I've done consulting, so I can do consulting on this. I mean, there's just a variety of different opportunities that I have in connections with other places. So being able to put yourself in a position so that you do have options, because sometimes you just never know what's going to happen. If somebody came in tomorrow and said you're not being renewed next year, in student affairs, I have options. There's a teaching position open in comm. That's where my academic rank is. I can apply there. I could go to K-State and teach in their program, because I can't do that now because we're both in the state of Kansas, and that's conflict of interest at that point. So, thinking about always putting yourself in a position that would allow you to do other things. One of my mentees had been in an instructor role to fill a temp slot, and most institutions have a cap on how many years they'll allow that. It's usually 3, 5, or 7 that you can be in a temp line, which is not tenure track, but every year you wait to see if you're going to be renewed. And so at the point she was ready to get a PhD, prior to that, she started doing some online teaching for another university outside of the state of Kansas. And so through her whole PhD program, she's been able to do that, and that's been able to help pay her rent and other things during that. So really thinking about opportunities that exist, and they're not always at the institution you're at. And so really networking and thinking, about that from other perspectives, and think about the discipline that you would really like to be able to teach in. So typically for college, for a regionally accredited institution, this is my HCL reviewer knowledge, if you have a master's degree to teach in higher ed, you have to have 18 graduate hours in that specific field to be able to teach in that field prior to achieving a doctorate. So that's always something to kind of think about, what would that look like?
So going off of that, because my undergrad just went through their HLC accreditation and they got docked, or they got like a slap on the hand because someone with their master's in communication
Was
work,
teaching English, I bet.
or no, the other way around,
Okay.
English
That's very
teaching
common.
in comm, and they said that's not acceptable because that's not their content area. So you're
Right.
saying now that with us and our master's degree, we're only acceptable to teach in education? Like, is that how this is
Right
gonna
now,
roll?
based on what you have. So think about if you've done something, how many chose an elective outside of education? So you've taken a class or two outside of did you take them from the same department?
Mine was counseling.
Well,
Okay.
everybody was kind of different, because I took one with human resources,
Right.
so that's business, but that's
Right.
only 3 credit hours.
Right.
That's not 18.
Right. So let's say you go to an institution that's something that you're really interested in is teaching in management or HR specifically, right? You can still take other classes from Fort Hays to get the certificate in HR, right? Because there's 611 you took, and there's 12, 13, 612, 613, 614. That would get you to 12.
Okay.
You can take a general management class. So there's a variety of things, but you have to kind of plan for that, because the only place you're going to get away from that is at a school that's not regionally accredited. And that is not a place you want to teach. If you start teaching someplace that's not regionally
That's a good
accredited,
point.
and the regional part is very important if you're teaching in the US, it's really hard to come out of that and get back into a regionally accredited institution to teach at.
Can you justify courses? So like I have a master's in higher education student affairs, and my undergrad is in leadership, and because the courses. What about, so I don't know if Hammond is doing this with you, Whitney, but some of us took the grad level course for organizational leadership as an undergraduate. So Dr. Hammond waived that requirement, and I got to take 2 electives.
But that does not give you graduate credit for that class. Yeah, so I have probably 200-ish advisees who are people who have a master's degree, who are, and I'm like, what's your educational plan? Well, I want to teach at St. Houston State in this area, but I only have 6 hours in this area, so I need an additional 12. If you don't know, yeah, I do know. That's a requirement, and that requirement came big in about 2001. So it's very, very consistent. And where you go to work, they will probably require you to provide an official transcript from every institution that you attended, and at minimum, where your undergrad was conferred and where your master's degree was conferred, and they keep those on file. So the provost office here, whenever we hire somebody new, that's over there, and they have to provide it. Because I've had employees that are like, I can't afford it. Yeah, you can. It's a requirement. It's not a negotiable thing to have that transcript.
So our master's in student affairs, is in student affairs. So is first year seminar really the only course that's applicable?
Not necessarily.
Skills
It would-
classes like that.
What, college skills?
Classes like the remedial classes.
And some
Right.
schools require like RAs to do a residential life like course, so that would be something.
So a lot of it just really depends. A lot of people in student affairs, higher ed, student personnel, depending on what it's, I mean, the most common and the easiest place probably for you to get experience is going to be in a first year experience class. Now, for Hayes, let's say that you're just graduating this May. You can't teach NARS for 2 years because you need to learn the institution. And I cannot tell you how important that is because we have people that give out really, really bad information who've been here 2 years still. So, because they're global. I mean, the students in the room are global, right? They're from all different places. And so just because you did something and I'm going to pick on Holly just because she has an undergrad from here, okay? So just because Holly was in this major as an undergrad doesn't mean things haven't changed. And she can't talk to every program on this campus. And so having an understanding of referral and the importance of referral becomes very important, where we've had people, multiple people who have said, oh, don't worry about that, gen ed, you can double dip that with your major. You cannot do that at Fort Hays State. And so when the students have come to our office and said, well, our teacher said that, I'm like, who's your teacher? I'll say, just wanted to update you, the Fort Hays policy is not that. That is not accurate. Because that misleads students to believe that something is going to happen that's not going to happen. And so then when they get the degree summary and the degree analyst says, no, you can't do that, saying my freshman seminar teacher said I could does not, get you off of meeting the requirements as they're laid out. And so, knowing the institution, when you first come as a professional to a new place that you're not familiar with, do you really feel like you know the institution, right? Because those kids, they don't know. And they're looking at you because they need you to tell them. And I always tell people, just say, I do not know the answer to that, but hey, let's pull up the web. Let's see if we can find it right here. Or let me find out and I will tell you at the next class period. So being diligent, because I'm always like, don't tell them something just to make it up to, get it off of your plate type thing. Make sure that the information you're giving them is good information.
So looking at it from a feasible standpoint, if we have to have the 18 credit hours and graduate level from another content area, if we were interested in it and everything, how feasible is that to get into a grad program and not complete a master's degree for them? Because my undergrad's in history,
right?
And I know that's not going to be feasible for me to be like, oh, hey, Wisconsin, I just want to get these 18 credit hours so I can start teaching in history, but I'm not going to get your degree or your PhD. I'm not going to be accepted into those programs.
Do you know how many people we have doing that? I mean, literally, I have tons of grad students who are doing that. So what you need to do is think about, how do I need those hours? Are you on a campus where they'll allow you to take classes, right, at no cost? And some places do that, and it's 3 hours a semester, and then you can take whatever, right? And so you really need to think about, what does that look like? Do I need to find another institution that will allow me to do it? And I always tell people, when, I have a lady right now with English, she wants a very, very specific set of courses. They are not courses that we offer on a regular rotation. They're on a 3 or 4 semester rotation. And so when she said, well, tell me when these, I can't tell you that. So I responded and I said, I'm copying the department chair on this email because I would like him to respond telling you what the rotation of the courses are that will work best for what you're looking for. So then Dr. Luschner chimed in and he said, sorry about the lit class you're talking about. We just taught that last fall, so it'll probably be 4 semesters before that happens again. So, does that institution, before you apply, even as a non-degree seeking student, or if you're wanting to get a second master's, power to you. But, that's 30 hours plus toward a doctoral program that you could be doing, because doctoral hours are what? Graduate hours. So, thinking about what does that really look like for you, but knowing when you start doing that, if it's towards a doctoral program, that there's a clock, and every institution's clock is different. So how long are their courses valid? Because if you span over 10 years, you're done. You have to start over. Mm-hmm. So, and 10, that's beyond generous because the max cap usually is 8 years. So you need to know that, because what is your plan? What's your educational plan through the process? Do you want to start a doctoral program and take the 18 hours? And if you don't decide you still want to do it, no big deal, you've got the 18 hours. That's great if that's what the process is, but really thinking about what does that look like And timeline. You have to think about how much can I do based on the job I'm in, because if it's your first year in a professional job and you're trying to do classes too, you know, how much impact is that going to have? I mean, think about right now, you're taking classes and you're a grad student, you work a part-time position, right? If you were working a full-time position, knowing that sometimes that's more than 40 hours when you're in student affairs during a week, and that fluctuates based on what role you're in, when are the busy times, you know, is that a reasonable load for you? Or do you need to take that break and say to yourself, maybe I need this first year of working to figure out what would really work the best for me. You know, so I can really think about it. I can talk to other people at the institution. Maybe I find out what the need is, and does the need line up with things I'm interested in? Do I see myself staying here long term? What does that actually look like? And that applies to teaching online as well as on campus. Regionally accredited is regionally accredited, and it's not differentiated from that perspective. Other questions? When you're doing it as an add-on, it's really easy as a junior professional to go, I need the money, I need the money, I need the money, okay? You really need to think about what that money breaks down to. If you're getting a course in a box, okay, and you're dividing like by the hours, because, you know, we tell a student for every hour that you're in class, it's 2 to 3 hours outside. The same goes for you. If it's a course in a box, it's 2 to 3 hours. If it's a course you're developing and you're still doing, like, you know what the assignments are, but you're really still working it out, you need to think about that's not 2 to 3 outside plus the hours in the classroom. So, I mean, there is a reality. You know, what does that look like time-wise? And when you divide the money by that, is it worth it? Because a lot of places do not pay well on an overload. I can tell you, I am not paid well to teach a graduate class on overload. But I also remember what it was like coming out of a grad program and having debt. You know, and thinking, well, they'll pay me half of it halfway through, another half, man, I could make some big payments on student loans. But you really have to think about, do I want to kill myself for that small amount of money? And typically when you're at a master's degree, just coming out of a master's degree, the money is even worse. It's different than the way a faculty member gets paid on overload, because that's actually based on their salary. When you're an add-on, it's not based on your salary typically. So you really have to kind of step back and think about that.
So it's more along the lines of adjunct, like it's in the same.
You would be an adjunct.
Yes.
If you're not in a faculty appointment. And that's a choice I made to go off of a split to this is my primary, and my academic rank currently goes with overload. And what does the department expect from you? Do they just expect you to do the teaching component, or do they also expect you to sit on graduate committees? Because that is a time sucker. And it's a good investment. And when you're a faculty member, you're paid to do that. When you're not in that role, that becomes very, very different. So, I mean, when Jacob came and asked me about sitting on his committee, you know, I talked through that with him, because I can't just sit on every committee. I have to really think about what my primary role is, you know. And so being able to look at that, and you have to think about that, because depending on what the committee is expected, this is a culminating. So that's an easier gig than it is in communication studies, where you're sitting on the thesis committee. Mm-hmm. And you're involved in somebody's research and checking their statistics and, you know, all the things that come with that. That's extremely time consuming. So you always want to know, what does teaching, what does that mean? Give me the description of what all that includes. Because someplace it truly is, you show up, you teach the class, and that's it. But you have to think about those other duties as assigned if that comes with the teaching thing, because you probably already have that with your regular full-time job. Other questions?
Are there guidelines or principles that you follow when you're trying to structure up content for 100 to 600? you know, you talked about textbooks and knowing the technical writing versus the introductory writing and things like that, but how do you really determine the correct amount of challenge for a student in those courses? Because like our technology course, some of our assignments are very, very easy. Like they are 100 level stuff. Other assignments, not so much in other courses. So how do you determine that when you try to think
Okay,
through
so
it?
personally, I'm thinking about what does that mean at the institution? Because numbering is very different from institution to institution. So here, freshman, sophomore, 1 and 200, okay? So what is my concept? They may have not taken Comp 1 and Comp 2. If I'm having them do a presentation, what if they haven't done Comp 100 yet? So that impacts the rubric I create to grade. Because let me tell you, if you're in my grad class on the discussion board and you're chatting it up like we're text messaging, you may get no points. Because I'm a half a point for typos. You're a grad student. You need to read before you hit the post button. Or correct it as soon as you realize it, you know, because you would have time to do that. And I'm reading everything that's attached to your thing, so it's not like I'm just reading the original post that you made, okay? But because that's important. You know, you're a graduate student. There's a whole different type of writing expectation at that point than there is at 100. I have a different expectation of a junior or senior who's on the 600 side than I do of a graduate student. And there's extra work for grad students on top of it, and it always involves research in my class. So, you know, what that actually looks like. And I'm not going to teach you how to use the library. You're a graduate student. Freshmen probably don't know. We maybe need to talk about how the library works, right? How do you submit in Blackboard? Very basic type of thing, right? But when you've been here and you've gone year after year after year, you know, and I have people that'll say, I don't know why you're so critical of my writing. You know, when I've highlighted 5 sentences that don't even make sense if you read them out loud to yourself, you know, there's a standard. And I do make adjustment for that, but that's just like every time I see somebody who's not a junior or senior trying to get in my class, I send them an email. I'm like, you need to, you know, you're not prepared to do this. These are the prereqs. This is the expectation. And hardly any of them ever front to stay. Oh my God, we're going to have to do that. I'm out of here, you know, but they should know what the expectation is, you know, and there is an expectation, and it's based on the level of the class. I would never expect that in my freshman seminar. Total difference, the directions, but I still need to be thorough, right? Because if I was somebody else reading this, does this make sense? Like I'll have people that go, I couldn't tell that's when the assignment was due. Really? This week is gray. The next week is yellow. The next week is gray. The next week is yellow. All the things are highlighted. It says the exact due date beside every one of them, as well as where you submitted. It says that too. Not buying that. You know, and my very first announcement is how to read the assignment table. You need to review the syllabus and you need to read the assignment table and see that things are grouped by weeks, and 1159 means 1159, and it literally will shut off and I don't accept late work. That's very different than what I might do in freshman seminar. But that's one of the things that you have to feel how to judge on your own. Some people don't make differences. But you'll hear kids say, man, I'm in Comp 1 and you'd think I was getting a doctorate or something in this person's class because they're that critical. They're not at that point that they're learning. It's a foundation class, right? That's supposed to help them throughout all these other things. So thank you. I don't want to keep you guys late. I know you have things to do, but if you do have questions, don't hesitate to email me. I may not respond to you during the day, but I do try to do all my email at night, just because the way my schedule is. And that is something I would always tell you too, if you're going to teach, you need to figure out how flexible you are. And I say this to all new advisors. If you're going to respond to emails at 2 in the morning and on weekends, they're going to expect that. So if you do it one time, they are going to continually expect you to do that. You know, so you always have to figure out what that boundary is. Do you give out your private number or do you only give them your office number? Because that's a decision you make, but right, once you put the syllabus out there, if you think those students are going to share that number with somebody else, you are crazy, because they will. It's all about, oh, so-and-so, you know, I know so-and-so, and they know your kid, and they had your phone number, and so blah, 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 blah. So do you think you could help me at 11 o'clock at night? When my phone's ringing, I'm going, I don't know who that is. You know, so then when I don't answer, it's usually the text message. So I got your number from so-and-so. And then I usually have to have that conversation with so-and-so about, you were given that number because of this. It wasn't for you to just share with the world. So, but you have to think about those things, because how much you want every ounce of what you do in the classroom to impact outside of your life, you control that. And it's just like going, you know, people, they tell you can go to teach. You can be mean on the first day because you can always get nicer, but you can't be nice and get meaner. You know, you can't act like there's no rules and then all of a sudden want rules later, because people are already adjusted, even if it's been one day, to how you were that first day. So, you know, being clear about what expectations are, that's important. So have a great week. Have a great last month of school.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin.
Thank
This semester.
Real quick, you guys, if you haven't already, you should sign up for student government's the big event for community service hours. They need people, and I promised one of them I would make an announcement to y'all. So